CashFlow Diary Podcast, episode 286.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the CashFlow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other CashFlow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the CashFlow Diary Podcast. I am your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you are here today because we're going to talk about something that I think it not only does it need to be said, but it's a mindset shift that needs to absolutely happen. And it's going to come, I think, at you in a very unique way. What do I mean? I mean, what if you could actually make more and work less? Now, I know some of you, when I said that, you was like, oh, I know what he's going to talk about. I promise you, you have no clue. And more importantly, today's guest has done exactly that, famously in so many ways. And he comes to us after figuring this out and is ready to share it with you. He's got a new book. He's got tons of things going on that can help you and I get more from our same 24 hours. Keep that in mind. He's got the same 24 hours as everybody else, but he's able to produce more in that 24 than what you and I are able to do. And he's going to show us how. And I'm excited about that. We have with us today none other than Stephan Aarstol. You may remember him from a show, you might have heard of it, Shark Tank, right? He's known, and now he's got a very distinct profile over there. What do I mean by that? He's known as one of the worst pitches, but also one of the best businesses. It's like kind of funny. Worst pitch that actually got funded. And think about this. Out of 7 years, known as one of the best businesses. That means he knows something. And he's done all of this with a 5-hour work day. I'll say that again. His company has transitioned to a 5-hour work day. And if it's got Mark Cuban's money and attention, I think it should have ours. Let's listen to what Stephan Aarstol has to say. Stephan, you there?
Yep. Thanks for having me on, Jay.
I'm glad that you are here because I know many spouses right now are thinking, wow, you can help my spouse only work for 5 hours? This is going to be good, honey. You need to listen to this. I can hear it already.
Yeah, that's funny. That's one of the things that the shorter workday addresses is sort of this mindset in America where it's just work. We're working more and longer hours, even though, productivity is going through the roof for knowledge workers.
Right.
But, people are thinking more money and, becoming a little more successful is going to make you happier. When in reality, we should take this opportunity of all this productivity to sort of reset and say, the important thing in life is to have free time to pursue, better relationships, better health. Sort of a better balanced, diet that we've really gotten away from in the U.S.
Indeed. Now, before we get too far into it, I've got to ask you the standard first question. So, Stephan, I tend to think of today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes. So think Batman, Wonder Woman, the Hulk, and before we knew them as that. They had an origin story, and entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common because we go around, we save people, right? That's at least in our head. That's what we're doing with our product or service. We dress up, we present ourselves, we get dressed up. Sometimes we even wear a cape if it'll sell a product. The point though is before we reveal ourselves to the world as that superhero, we start somewhere. So before the Washington Post, before Inc. Recognized you guys as one of the fastest growing companies, before Entrepreneur Magazine, before Mark Cuban, Fast Company, Mashable, and all the other things you guys have done, who is Stephan Aarstol?
The funny thing there is that because of Shark Tank, I've got a little taste of fame and a little broader audience to speak to. But I think I'm pretty much the same entrepreneur I was before and after. I came out of grad school and I started an internet company, and I was the young kid, and they put me on internet marketing. I learned it, and we did very well with that company. We went from sort of an unknown pre-startup company to a dominant industry leader in the medical imaging space. I was a part of a team, but I felt I was sort of one of the driving forces of that team. But you're a young kid, and everybody thinks you know nothing. And I was very good at search engine marketing and stuff like that. And then I started my own business. I started a poker chip business, and I was doing well with that. But it was a small business, $500,000 a year it was doing. And then I started my paddleboard business and got on Shark Tank, and all of a sudden I'm an internet guru. So people are inviting me to conferences to speak about search engine marketing, and I'm giving these talks thinking, I know there's 10 or 15 people in this room that are way better at this than me. Right. And that is the sort of the world we live in. So I don't take my notoriety too seriously any more than I didn't let anybody tell me they were smarter than me back in the day.
Indeed. Totally makes sense. Now, you're going to have to bridge a gap for me.
Okay.
You said medical imaging to poker chips to paddle boards. Help me out there.
Yeah, so the consistent tie-in, I got out of graduate school in 1999. So that was the height of the internet boom. And I was in San Diego here, and they were just handing out internet jobs with your resume, basically. And so I jumped into that, and 6 months later, it crashed. That was the bubble burst. But I was still with that company for 5 years. But because at the time I was the young kid, internet marketing was where I could make make my way, where everybody else that was in senior management, was 50, 60 years old. I, as the young kid, was going after the things that scared them. And that's what I felt like my path to success. And then after that, I was, how can I use this knowledge to do something, for myself? I was, making a decent salary with the company, but I wanted to jump out on my own. I sort of had that entrepreneurial bug, but a lot of it was you want to get compensated more for what you're doing, So I went out, and there was a poker boom in 2004, and poker, the World Series of Poker. This guy named Chris Moneymaker won the World Series of Poker. He was like a accountant that liked to play in his local casino, and he won $10 million in this poker series. So then every Joe in the country thought he could become a pro poker professional.
Right.
And huge boom in poker, huge boom online, and I had a poker game with a buddy, so I started playing that poker game, and I thought, we should be able to have really nice chips like they have in Las Vegas. Nobody, you couldn't find them. And so I put together, one-on-one together, and, buypokerchips.com became sort of a leading provider of high-end poker chips worldwide.
Whoa. Hold on. Are you telling me Buy Poker Chips was not taken?
Well, buypokerchips.com was not at the time.
What? That's crazy. How come every time I have a great idea like that, it's like it's already taken?
Yeah. I mean, what's funny is when I started in the internet business in 1999, I was working with guys that had registered like Ford.com and stuff like that.
Wow.
I mean, they were squatting on great names, right? And then, fast forward 5 years when I started the poker chip company, still relatively easy to get, a decent, short domain. Fast forward to, when I started the paddleboard company, it's just harder and harder. Today, it's just ridiculous. You got to really come up with a long name or some goofy name or buy a name. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, well, it definitely is more mature than it was back then, which really isn't that long ago, but sounds like it in internet time and in a very, very different space. Now, what was it? Because I know a number of listeners and a number of people, as they're listening to you, they're like, wow, how could he do that? And I call it the superhero moment. It's the moment when you realize, you know what, I'm doing this job. And this job is okay. It's okay. It's paying the bills. It's doing what I need it to do. But there's more inside me. And because there's more inside me, I want to offer this to the world. How did you develop the courage and discover your superpower, if you will? And more importantly, go, you know what? I'm going to offer this to other people.
Well, I think it was, I definitely started it on the side. I mean, I was out of graduate school with a lot of debt and, there wasn't a lot of money there. So I needed to work just to pay the bills. And how do you make that jump? And a lot of people just talk about they're going to quit their day job and they're going to go after some big opportunity. I think that's insanity. You want to keep that day job and you want to moonlight on your other business until it can support you. So I moonlighted the poker chip business for about a year. The month I quit my regular job, my side business was doing $50,000 a month in revenue.
Nice.
So I didn't want to really make that leap at the time. My wife at the time was 3 months pregnant too. So I had a kid 6 months away. I'm quitting my job and, going all in. But it worked out well. The month he was born, I had the biggest month in the history of the company. We did 140,000 in sales that month with a profit of about 60,000, which was my salary for the other job for an entire year.
Nice.
So,
That's
sounds nice, right? And I thought I was going to retire, and my head got really big, and I was like literally in the hospital. I'm shopping for like yachts, right, in the magazine in the waiting room.
Nice.
The business, plateaued for a few years and then started to go down, and I had to find something else, and that's ultimately why it led me to the paddleboard business. But you can never sort of rest on your laurels.
No, you hinted at it earlier, and I want to circle back to it. Not right now, but soon. When you talk about knowledge workers, by being a knowledge worker, the idea of like not learning and stopping and hey, I've made it and I'm done is that concept just does not exist.
Yeah, it does not exist, and I mean that's the sort of the insanity of kids spending a couple $100,000 to go to a nice university. For 4 years and then getting out and just sort of expecting, the world owes them something. It's like, you have just started.
Yes, it's time to start over. Right. It's time to start over. Here, grab a book, catch up. Now, you mentioned something though, which I like, the idea of starting your, something on the side, your side hustle, figuring it out, as you go. My question though is, if you're already working a full-time job and then you're gotta do this thing on the side, how on the earth do you get that down to 5 hours? How does a normal human being, do that? I mean, let alone the guy who's got kids and a spouse and would like to keep them. Yeah.
So when I started my poker chip business, my day job was not a 5-hour day. I was working a regular day. And there are a lot of people that do that. I mean, that's sort of the common path in entrepreneurship. And really, today you're seeing more and more people become sort of independent contractors. They're going out on their own and doing consulting. They're doing a podcast like you. They're doing all these things. They're starting businesses, a lot of them on the side and still have a regular job. And I think this is sort of the cream of the crop is doing stuff like this because they figured out that, hey, I can do this other stuff. It's not that hard to do. So with the experience I had in my paddleboard company is we were this fast growing company. We were able to attract just incredible people. We were basically a surf brand in Southern California, offices 2 blocks from the beach. We've been on Shark Tank. Mark Cuban is an investor. We're the fastest growing company in the city. It's easy to hire people at that point, right?
Right.
So I'm getting these great people in and, right out of school. And then, I'm raising their salary $60,000, $80,000, after just being with us for a year or 2 years, and they're leaving. And I'm going, what the hell is going on here? And so this 5-hour workday was actually a reaction to that. Like if you, this is a retention and a recruitment strategy. If you want to attract these best people in the world and, get them to work for you for, 3 or 4 or 5 years, which, 3 years is about the most anybody works anywhere anymore. You've got to give them a better deal. You've got to empower them to go do that thing on the side. I was afraid of them doing stuff on the side before until I lost, a couple people. And then I was like, wait a second, you need to rethink this. I need to give them an offer, a job offer so attractive that they come in, they can do their little side job. And in 3 or 4 years when they leave, they're going to have, changed my company for me. So that's really what the 5-hour workday is about. A lot of people hear the 5-hour workday and they're like, oh, these guys are working part-time or this is a lazy company. No, this is the company with the best people in the world. They're going to be here for a few years. They're going to go off and, make their millions elsewhere. And I already have a couple of employees that have gone off and, they got $1 million companies of their own. And we're only, a 5-year-old company.
Yeah. And I kind of like that philosophy because that's, I think about my own company, my CFO and operations officer, that they tell me all the time that one of the reasons that they're still, here is the flexible work schedule is we're not overly stringent in that area, and it gives them the opportunity to do their other things. And until you said it was as a retention and recruitment strategy, I hadn't really thought of it as retention and recruitment, but it is a benefit and it could be something that other people could use in lieu of, say, the traditional 401k or something, right?
Oh, exactly. I mean, we had no benefits. We had season tickets to the Chargers was our benefits. There was no health care. There was no nothing, and we didn't pay very much, and we're trying to recruit top people. When you got the Googles and the, Yahoos of the world paying kids out of college, $150,000, $200,000 a year. How do you get these good people? So you gotta be creative there. One sort of side note on that recruitment and retention strategy. So us, this concept of moving to a 5-hour workday because we've become more productive as a society, knowledge workers have, because of productivity tools. 100 years ago, something very similar happened in the Industrial Revolution. You had factory workers that were working, 10 to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week in the factories. And, they were mildly productive or whatever, but then the assembly line came along, and all of a sudden the pace and the productivity of these workers shot up, and not an incremental increase. It was like 10x, the same thing that's happening today. And Henry Ford in 1914 basically did a similar experiment here. He moved to an 8-hour workday, 5 days a week. And the reason he did this is because people were literally dying on the factory floors of these factories.
Wow.
0.5% of the population of the U.S. was being killed or injured on the job in the early 1900s because all of a sudden this was unsustainable, these long hours, when people were actually, being pushed along by this, highly productive assembly line. So he said, something's got to change, right? And so he changed the workday. And a lot of people, the other companies said, this is crazy, this is going to ruin the industry or whatever. But what he did is he stole all the good workers from those companies. And he grew his market share from, in the 20s to like 60% market share of the auto industry. It was, pretty incredible.
Well, yeah, what you're bringing up is interesting, but it brings up a good question that I've got to ask. So if, and back then, if it was the assembly line that came along that made the workers more productive, and you've mentioned this a couple of times, knowledge workers and increased productivity, what is our assembly line of today?
The assembly line is information. In like our business, we have to develop products that involves, communicating with the designers of the products up front, and then, getting samples of the products, and then, going overseas and doing the first production run, or even finding a factory overseas. All of this communication to just get things along. And, the communications are now, email, or even getting away from phone, email, text, Skype, stuff like that. And today's workers, even though we say we work a 40-hour work week, we actually work a 47.5-hour work week. Half of the country works more than 50 hours a week. And they go home on the weekend with their cell phone, and they're doing emails on their cell phone, and, on the weekends and evenings. And the reason they're doing those emails is because they know if they can, send an email out at night at 8:00, get a response at 9, send them back at 9:30. They've basically done a day's work by the time, the next day starts.
Oh my God, you just totally nailed me right there. The assembly line. You just totally nailed me right there. Because that's exactly what we've got people working in many different time zones. And I'm hypersensitive to the fact that they're going to be awake while I'm asleep. I need to make sure that I send them stuff now. Because by the time I wake up, all of it will be done and we can be productive that much more.
And then imagine if you take a 3-day weekend and you don't communicate with anybody. It's like this thing of this assembly line of communication stops. So the highly productive people are sort of always on. And that's what you'll find with entrepreneurs. They kind of work 7 days a week, but they kind of work 2 to 3 hours a day, as opposed to going in and banging out, four 12-hour days and then doing nothing. That doesn't work in the knowledge working world.
No. Dude, I've got all kinds of goosebumps right now. You just described my life in a very real way. And I'm just like, my wife's always said, "What can you take today off?" I'm like, I can't take the entire day. I just need 2 hours. Let me do this and then I'll be done. And then we can go do whatever.
And the problem there, Jay, is that everybody is still working these long 50-hour days and doing that other thing when they don't need to be. They can reduce their work day to we work 8 a.m. to 1 p.m., get off, and then you don't mind taking a few calls in the evening or whatever, because you know your weekday or your work week is better than most people's vacation weeks.
Ain't that the truth? I mean, we get a lot done. This is awesome. Okay, so tell us, how do we do it? How do we get down to 8 to 1? Somebody, all right, let me preface this, everybody. I know you're listening. This means take notes. All right, mark this time. You're going to come back to this. You're going to hear this over and over again. This is where you're going to want to make sure you implement something. So share with us, please, sir. Free us from this 8-hour mentality.
So with myself and all the entrepreneurs that I know, you just sort of naturally have to figure out stuff. There's a lot of pressure on you to produce, or you go out of business. And so you figure out which tools are going to make you work faster. And then when I started Tower Paddleboards, it wasn't a one-person business anymore. We have 11 employees. I had to sort of teach them how to do this. And so as part of the book, the website, 5hourworkday.com, we have a downloadable list of 38 productivity tools that we use, which are sort of tools of the trade of knowledge workers. There's tools on there that are literally worth $1 million. And that people don't even believe exist when I tell them they exist. And a good example is a sourcing tool called panjiva.com, panjiva.com.
Okay.
And essentially what this website does is it aggregates homeland security data, which is every container that comes into the country has to have a weight, a general description of contents, very short, where it came from, the address, company name, and the address, company name of where it's going to. This is public information because of, what happened in 911. So just that information be out there isn't very helpful. But when they aggregate it all together, I can go onto that site and type in, stand-up paddleboards. And it will show me every container that came into the country of stand-up paddleboards over time, every month, how many containers came, where did they come from, what was the weight of them, so I can tell how many paddleboards were in it, where is it going to. And then, so I find manufacturers, and then I zero in on a manufacturer, in China or, Vietnam somewhere, and put in their name, and it will tell me everybody that they've shipped to. So basically all of the customers that they service and volumes. And is their volume of shipments increasing or decreasing? And this is how you get a quality score on basically a factory, as opposed to, historically going to something like Alibaba, which is, had the biggest IPO in the history of the world because it was so valuable, which was connecting, suppliers with, producers or producers with, companies, brands and stuff like that. But in there, you search paddleboards, you're going to get 2,000 results. And you don't know which one of these are good factories, bad factories, just completely scammers, middlemen, fake companies, whatever. It's just the wild, wild west, right? So what Panjiva does is it gives you that quality score because you're seeing real data. You can zero down in on your competitor. It will tell you where they source everything from and, volumes and stuff like that. I've been sourcing from China for 10 years. The first time I went there was last year. Now, okay. So that is how knowledge workers are faster today.
You realize you're messing with people's head right now. I think you enjoy this. This is good though. Come on, I want more.
So that tool has been around 10 years, and I've spoke at universities, procurement, that have procurement departments. I've spoke to people that have $100 million companies. They've never even heard of this tool. And it's just, that's insane. What do you do? Oh, we send people to China or do some retarded thing. They spend years and, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Or, you just riskily send a $50,000 check to some company that you don't know whether they're even legit, and for no reason.
Wow. Okay. So clearly if that one tool alone is I hope worth listening today, guys. But more importantly, you're telling me there's 38 more just like that. That's impressive because you just cut out. Do you even speak any of the Asian languages? So the key to your business, my business, indeed, dare I say, every business on the planet, I think you're learning it today. When you listen and you hear the systems, the tools, the techniques, the short, quote-unquote, cuts to the ways of thinking and getting stuff done. Understand brute strength is good, but there are times where finesse makes it happen. And the cool thing is, all of this is a learned skill. You may be listening going, man, I'm not like that. That's okay. You don't have to be like that today, but you might want to get there eventually. And that's one of the reasons you listen. That's one of the reasons you follow. And I appreciate all of that every time you do. Now, if for some reason you'd like to pick up some systems and ideas on how to do this inside the real estate world, feel free to go grab a copy of my book, Cashflow Diary, 10 Steps to Creating Wealth in Any Economy. You get a free PDF copy by going over to cashflowdiary.com/free book. Again, that's cashflowdiary.com/free book. Put in your name and email address and we will happily email it to you. But one special thing to be aware of is if you are the audiobook persuasion, feel free to do the exact same thing, because right behind that, we'll give you a special discount on the audiobook as well. Nonetheless, it's enough of me. Let's get back and get some more systems.
No.
Okay. I'm just curious. I'm like, hey, why bother learning? He's like, I can do it right here. I've got a tool for that.
Literally in an afternoon, you can do sourcing. It's not perfect information, but you can go in there. You can almost get market share data. Wow. And it's a great way.
That's amazing. Okay, so using all of these tools from your iPad, basically, is what you're telling me, are the things that increase productivity, because you just beat the person, standing start. Everybody's at the same level. If you're both sourcing from China, one person gets on a plane, but by the time they get there, you've already negotiated a deal and contract and have started actually being able to ship product, is what you're telling me.
Well, but the important thing is you have a good factory, because the problem with sourcing is you go through one factory, you go to a next factory, and this factory doesn't work out, and this whole long process. That's why companies are valuable, because they figured out all that stuff, and you don't have to start at ground zero, right? So, but now you can just condense that time down so much that it's really quite remarkable.
Awesome. You got to give us at least one more, because that was incredible.
Okay. Let's see what other good tools are there. It covers like all kinds of stuff. For even human resources, like we use a site called Recruiter Box. Traditionally, go ahead.
Recruiter Box?
Recruiterbox.com.
Okay.
And this is a fairly new tool, but essentially it creates like a centralized place on the web that will sort of accept all of the people like applying to your company. So you put a Craigslist ad out. Traditionally, you'd have to field all those. I would have to field all those because I'm the one doing the hiring. And you get 100 resumes in, and you got to put them in folders, and then track who you're going to call back and all this stuff. And if you want to share it with somebody, it's this huge hassle. Every time we hire somebody, I just cringe. I feel like I lose a month of my life historically. Okay, now we fast forward to Recruiter Box. We just put the Recruiter Box email into Craigslist. We can cross post to Monster or whatever, Indeed, and then it sort of, as people apply, it feeds them in here. It grabs all their social data. It sort of scours the web for that, so you can quickly just go in there and get a profile of somebody. I can assign this person and say, hey, this person is worthy of whatever. That notifies the other people on my team that are, and then you can sort of order process people, right? It just makes the process so much easier. I mean, that's not Panjiva level change, but it's an incremental, you've made a process much more faster and much more efficient.
Well, it's not Panjiva level for you, but for someone who's thinking their idea was, hey, I want to become an independent or contract recruiter or something of that nature, it probably is.
Yeah. So, and there's just a number of those, types of things.
Got it. Totally understood. Okay. So you're just doing significantly more in the same amount of time. So you're not sacrificing quality. You're not sacrificing anything. You're just getting more done with less time.
Yeah. Hey, I'm going to give you one more just because you talked about the domains. So there's one, it's called, and I've obviously in the internet business, I had to get a lot of domains. So and maybe you've used this one, but it's called Domain Name Generator by Spotify. So, or not, is it Spotify? No, Shopify. Domain Name Generator by Shopify. Shopify is like an e-commerce company, and this isn't even their main business. This is some random tool they have on their site, but it's hugely valuable. So you can go in there and put in a word our company brand is Tower. So I put in Tower, and then it's going to go find all of the domain names that have the word Tower in it, and something else, and just do word combos of that, but also find out if they're available. So it'll give you back, 3,000 of these domains, and then you can just quickly scan through those. And you don't have to go think of a domain in your head, go see if anybody has a website, go to who is and try to find who owns this.
Right.
And that whole process, okay, now you can just do that with a couple clicks, boom, and you've got, a couple thousand to look through real quick.
Well, I think we're beginning to understand why you can have a bad pitch and still get Mark Cuban's money, because you, sir, are smart. I like it. I like what's going down here. So talk to me about that, though, that process, because you're on Shark Tank. Obviously, it's not something you do every day, but at the same time, you're trying to put your best foot forward, and you don't. Now, many people would crumble or quit or who knows what, and that's probably what they're afraid of, is I got to speak in public. But yet, you made it through anyway. What was that like?
So, yeah, when Shark Tank actually called me out of the blue, I'd never even heard of the show. And they asked if I would like to be on this show called Shark Tank. And I'm like, oh, because at the time we were a tiny business. I just hired my first employee 3 weeks earlier. We had 35,000 in sales, but things were starting to take off. And they're like, "Do you want to be on the show Shark Tank?" And I'm like, "Oh God, what is this show going to be?" And then the guy's like, "It's on Friday nights on ABC." And I'm like, "What? Are you kidding me?"
So how did you get my number? Like yeah, right. Totally. Yes.
And then, so I hadn't prepared, right? 6 weeks later, I'm pitching to the Sharks, and I really didn't even know all of their names. And then 2 days before I pitch, I learned that Mark Cuban is going to be on, because he was a guest shark at the time. So I'm thinking, I know that guy. he's my target. So, but I'm okay with public speaking. I don't really have a problem there, but I have a horrible memory, and they want you to do this little memorized 2 to 3 minute pitch when you go out there. And so I, practice that in my hotel room maybe 1,000 times the night before, and then go in to pitch it. I get in maybe a minute into my talk, hit my slideshow. It goes through all my slides, skips through them, and I'm trying to back it up, and I just lose my train of thought, freeze. And this is a live show. It's kind of like a live sporting event, and then what you see online is just the highlights. But if you screw up, they don't be like, "Oh, let's take that over again." You just start sweating or crying. People run out of there screaming.
Nice.
And so I froze, and it literally took me 3 or 4 minutes to just start talking again. I was doing this robotic thing, trying to memorize my pitch. They're like tearing into me, making fun of me. Barbara called me a leprechaun and a nerd at one point.
Nice.
And then 3 of them were out really quick. And nobody seemed to like the paddleboards. They just didn't really get the paddleboard industry. And so I literally pivoted in there, said, "Look, quit making an ass of yourself here. You got to pull this together." And so I started pivoting about just internet marketing, how I could do this for, the paddleboards, the poker chips. I helped my brother a little bit. He grew a company from, a $250,000 company. That's called Wesper.com. It's a tree trimming equipment company, basically, arborist supplies. A 20-year-old company that was doing $250,000 in revenue. And over a period of 6 or 7 years, he turned that into an $8 to $10 million company.
Nice.
By injecting internet marketing, very similar stuff to what I'm doing, with the poker chip company and my paddleboard company. And so I told them, like, "Look, I can do this for any business, and we can go out there and we can buy a $10 million business, inject what I know, turn it into a $30 million business, and do this sort of house flipping thing, right, with businesses."
Right.
And so then that perked up, Mr. Wonderful's ears and Cuban's ears. And so I got a bid from both those guys, but obviously I went with Cuban's bid. But it was a rough go in the tank. But what really matters is once you get out of there, what can you do with it?
Exactly. So I've got 2 questions that you probably have gotten before, especially once you mentioned the fact that you had a bid between those 2. But I'm curious to know, because we all do things for our reasons, and there are people we like working with and some we don't, and some we just, as in your case, I didn't even know their names. Well, why Mark over Mr. Wonderful? And what was that? There was a decision point. You're like, yes, absolutely, Mark.
Yeah. And Mr. Wonderful's offer was actually better. So he gave me, 20 or 150,000 for 25%, where Cuban's was 150,000 for 30%. But Cuban also offered first right of refusal to invest in any business I do in the future. It was a first in the history of Shark Tank, where he was just saying, I'm gonna sort of back in anything you want to do, or at least you can pitch it to me. But I looked at Cuban's, and I wasn't really, out there desperately looking to raise money. I wasn't approaching Shark Tank because we needed money. Money is always helpful, of course. You should always take it if somebody offers it.
Agreed.
But I saw Cuban as like a celebrity endorsement. I mean, it's $150,000 was nice, but when he like sent the money to me, they were going to wire it to me. I said, no, I want like a check. I want a physical check with his signature on it. I'm going to take a picture of myself with that check because that picture is worth more than the money, in my opinion.
Right?
It's a celebrity endorsement, right? Like usually you have to pay celebrities $100,000 a year to endorse your brand. This guy's going to do that for free?
Yes.
Are you kidding me?
Right.
And so, Mr. Wonderful, I think now is probably a legitimate, celebrity. At the time, I don't know who this guy was, and I assume most people didn't.
Well,
so
at least
it was
not
an
in the US.
easy decision.
Yeah. At least not in the U.S. and Canada. That probably it could have been a completely different decision simply because it was Canada. More for him. Okay, got it. And so let me ask the obvious or maybe not so obvious question. But how did appearing on Shark Tank, like, what was that like after? Did it help?
Yeah, and this is it sounds like an obvious question because everybody sort of assumes you go on Shark Tank, you're going to get. You become a millionaire. It's just instant. And I'm in a private Facebook group of people that have been on Shark Tank, right?
Oh, nice.
Have pitched. Some of them got deals, some of them not got deals. And there's a lot of people in there that are really, jaded because they assume there was going to be this just, you're on there, game over, right? But what happens is it's this huge wave of traffic that washes over you and then it's gone. Unless you can figure out some way else to monetize that. And what we did, because I was always an internet, marketing guy, a search engine optimization guy, which is basically, you create, as an e-commerce site, I look at it as a library that sells stuff. So we create a lot of very helpful content for people. They're going to find that content. We gave them that content and they're going to buy our products, right? And to popularize that content, you go out there and you get links to that content. So it's a link building thing. Great content, great product, build links into it. Very 1, 2, 3 step process. The ability to build links when you've been on Shark Tank is much easier. Press wants to talk about it. So I leveraged that one-time event to go out and get articles from every university I'd ever been to, all of the local newspapers, business journals from my hometown, from where I am now, all the industry journals. And so I got, some articles basically, and that changed the trajectory of our business. It wasn't being on Shark Tank. It was, how do you leverage out being on Shark Tank, to your benefit.
That's good. I mean, I think there's a good lesson in that. And instead of looking for the big one-hit wonder win, but actually having a strategy to those things with any marketing effort. And I mean, especially one that could possibly, as we now know, famously crash servers when you're on the show. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Now, I gotta ask, why paddleboards?
Well, the poker chips were booming when I started it, and it's much easier to start a booming business. I had no money there. I put $10,000 worth of poker chips on a credit card, hoping they would sell. But it was booming, and I learned that in a booming industry where there's no established players, much easier to sort of grow your brand, right? And I was looking for these other businesses. I had reduced my workday down after reading Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, right? And his book was really for individual entrepreneurs, guys like me, and it was like he was speaking exactly to me, to how to do this. And so I reduced, my workday down. Pretty soon I was just working Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and it was like no change in my business. Then I was just working the mornings, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. No change in my business, and it was forcing me sort of that, that pressure of time, so sort of forced me to find creativity tool or productivity tools, do things faster. And it freed up my afternoons to look at other businesses. And that's what I did for, 2 or 3 years. And, all of them failed. Then a buddy took me out paddleboarding one day in the sort of the waves here in La Jolla. And I had, historically I had surfed a little bit, but I wouldn't call myself a surfer. Surfing is very hard, but paddleboarding was like easy. I mean, like this is, anybody can do this. I was catching waves after half an hour out in the water, and, there was an old guy next to me, probably 65-year-old guy, catching every wave. And I asked him, like, man, you must be a pro. How long have you been doing this? He'd been doing it 5 days. So I immediately went and bought a paddleboard. And then I had, my son was 5 at the time, and I would throw him up on front, and I lived on the bay. So I'd paddle around getting exercise while he's up on front, right? And within a couple of days of having the board, he's riding it himself, all by himself. And I'm thinking, holy cow, like 65-year-old guys, 5-year-old, you can do it in the waves, you can do it on flat water. you can get exercise, you're out in the sun, spending time with your family. I'm like, this is a way bigger industry than people realize. So
right.
I started looking at the internet search statistics, like how many people are searching for paddleboards. And what I saw was an industry that was exploding. It was growing 100% a year. It had been for about 5 years. There were 80 companies that were selling it. So it was by no means at the birth of this industry, but it was fairly early on. Nobody was doing it really well online. And I figured if I could apply the exact same model that I did with my poker chip company to the paddleboard company, I could have success. And that's really what we did. And we didn't advertise for the first 3 years, not one dime. And we just grew the business. We were in 2014, we were named the fastest growing company in San Diego. And we were at the event, and we didn't really expect to win, but they were counting down from 100. And when they got to 3, they didn't name us. 2, they didn't name us. And then they named us. I went up there and gave a quick talk. And I said, and that year we were going to do 5 million in revenue. And I said, everybody in the company's here, all 5 of them. And, I pointed to the audience, and that was sort of the moment that everybody was like, holy cow, like the world has changed here. How is a surf company, which most people think is a joke in San Diego, right. Like, business journals wouldn't even write about me when we were on Shark Tank, because they're like, Shark Tank's not a real show. This isn't a real business. That's not serious business. Fast forward a couple of years, we win the fastest growing company in San Diego. We got 5 guys and we're doing 5 million in revenue because we're an efficient company.
Indeed, you have to be with it, and in that way. That's amazing to me. Now, what I find amazing is how you've built your resources, and I think there's a lesson for all of us to learn, is that just because there's something you tried or did that maybe didn't work out the way you wanted it to, that doesn't mean you didn't learn anything that you won't be able to use the next time you throw your dice on the table, or I should say chips on the table in this particular case. What would you say contributed from all of either the business failures that you had while the chips were, doing their thing, or even the past with the poker chips, and even within the medical devices? What were those key things that you got from there that you were able to apply to allow you guys to allow the paddleboard business to become what it is today?
I mean, really, for me, and a lot of people, they look at me today, especially because Shark Tank called me and they say this guy's just lucky.
Right.
And this is an overnight success. Got a little lucky. But the stuff I used to build the paddleboard business was the stuff I learned in 2000. The exact same stuff, really old school search engine optimization stuff. I haven't learned anything since then. I'm using that same stuff. So, but just sort of learning and trying it here and picking up some other stuff. So really overnight success is sort of this accumulation of 15 or 20 years of sort of learning. And then you're ready with that information, and then an opportunity will present itself, and you're ready to jump on that opportunity. Because I think everybody has sort of opportunities present themselves in their life, but a lot of times they just don't even see them, and they're not ready to take them. So I think that's really what you want to do, especially when you're young, is just start accumulating this information, knowing that someday this is going to pay off. You'll be prepared when opportunity presents itself.
I agree. There's a lot to be said to that. So I know those that have listened this far, they're definitely drinking the Kool-Aid. They want to know more about how they can reduce their work week. I know I'm after 38 tools that can make me more productive. I think I'm a tool junkie to some degree, but my team is we're always implementing something new to get more out of less. What's going to be the best way for anyone to connect with you after they're done listening today?
I mean, the best way is probably go to 5hourworkday.com, and my email's on there, Stephan@5hourworkday.com, or you can email me at Stephan@towerpaddleboards.com. I field all my own emails, so I'm not really hidden from the world. Very easy to get a hold of me. I want to make one point there, though, Jay, because that it's not really about these 38 tools that they're magically going to make you more productive. They certainly will help, but it's this mindset that what productivity is based on. And today, we sort of think that it's on, if you work 60 hours a week, you're gonna get more done than the person who worked 40 hours a week. That is the wrong. That's the wrong assessment in today's world, because what you have to do is you have to have time pressure. Like when you have, in the startup world, if you have money pressure, this creates creativity. So you got three guys in a garage that are trying to, upend a $100 million company. And you would assume just on the surface, this $100 million company with thousands of people is going to win every time. But the reality is the three people in the garage win every time. And it's because they have all of these constraints with money and with time and with people. And those constraints force upon them to come up with creative solutions. And creative solutions are what create competitive advantage in today's world. So the idea is you need to put artificial constraints on your life. And that's what the 5-hour workday. Force yourself to walk out of the office every day for the next 2 weeks at 1:00 and just try to get the same amount done. And it will make you uncomfortable, but you will start figuring out hacks. And that is the sort of the weird way to look at the world here. It's not about, throwing more time and money or more people and money at stuff. That's what governments do. And that's why they're, insanely inefficient and bloated, and they just become ineffectual. You put constraints on it. This is what the whole capitalistic system is about. But, it's time for the work week with knowledge workers to put some serious constraints on time to force these people to find those 38 productivity tools. And there's probably another 138, that I don't know about, but I'll find because I'm constrained. And the people that are not constrained will never find them.
Yeah, there's no need to find them if you have it. I've had one of my mentors a while ago that said when it comes to, specifically he was referring to real estate investors, and he says money makes people stupid. I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, because they have money, they don't take the time to find any other way to get transactions done. And, I've not used, we've not even used the bank in our transactions, not because banks don't exist, but because that option wasn't afforded to us at the beginning. And we had to be more creative to figure out how to buy apartment buildings and 182 units and cell phone towers and all this other stuff. So I like a lot about what you just said, because those constraints required, it was like, if I'm going to do this, I got to do it with something other than, money and credit and the normal things that people use to go out there to make this happen. I think there's a lot of lessons that can be had, even if you have those resources to go, well, how can we do it without them?
Yeah. And therein lies your competitive advantage, I would guess,
oh, yeah.
now you don't need the banks. And, those people that are using banks are like struggling.
Yeah. That is, I didn't see it that way until you just said it, and understanding that that's how that developed. And when you were talking, I'm like, okay, that's where that came from. I didn't think about intentionally imposing those limitations. Those limitations were just present. They were my gift at the time. So it wasn't necessarily something I would think to tell someone to intentionally impose. And hopefully for those of you listening, you just learned yet another something. So before we end, I got one more question here that I think is going to be awesome, and that I want to hear your thoughts on. Let's pretend for a second that someone who's been listening this entire time has, they're standing in front of the superhero outfit store, Stephan. They want to get started. They think they have the idea. They think, I think I'm an entrepreneur. I want to be one of those. And for whatever reason, they still have that voice in the back of their head. And I know that voice, and because it comes up at all the wrong times. And every time you're feeling horrible, it comes up. Every time you want to go do something great, it comes up. Every time, sometimes it comes from other people, but the voice is ever present, and you've done battle and you have won. Let's pretend that in the next 48 to 72 hours, that this person is going to do exactly what you said. What would you tell them to do?
I mean, I talk to university classes a lot. These kids, they don't really have a direction, so they want to know what to do. And a lot of them think that they don't have, money, so they can't start a business. And they don't have experience, so they can't start a business. But their advantage is they have nothing to lose. And I think that is a huge advantage that people just don't look at. And because you have nothing to lose, you can go after things that other people are scared of. And so look out in the world and see, what are people scared of? What scares the hell out of people? Right now it's social media. People don't know, they don't know anything about it. They don't know how to use it. I mean, even in my company, I would say, I'm sort of an SEO guy. I'm an internet marketing guy. Social media came along after I was in my prime sort of learning mode. And that's the thing that scares me. So go out and literally all of the information you need to know to become a worldwide expert in social media is available online. Spend 3 to 6 months in that. That's your side gig if you have a job. If you're in college, just do that all the time and play around with it and just get in there and immerse yourself and figure it out. And it doesn't just have to be social media, but figure out what scares other people because there is where the opportunity is.
Agreed. Well said. And I appreciate it. I also appreciate you taking the time to invest your knowledge and wisdom here with us at the Cashflow Diary today, sir.
Hey, it was a pleasure to be on. I appreciate the opportunity, Jay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean? That means 5hourworkday.com. Hello, get over there and make it happen. Most importantly, though, don't just get the tools. You've heard me say this before. I'm going to say this one more time. These are expert tools that you now get the privilege of learning how to use expertly. You can go make it happen. It's just going to take one step at a time. It's been fun talking to you guys today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.